If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 21, Learning Some Truth. July 1994. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. After few minutes of wait, Sharptooth arrived in the room. Harry greeted, "Good morning, Mr. Sharptooth. May you have gold flowing in your vaults and blood dripping your blades." Having learned about Harry being versed in goblins' greetings, Sharptooth was not surprised and he greeted back, "Good morning, Mr. Potter. May your vaults be filled with gold and business flows like water." Completing the greeting, Sharptooth the empty chair designed for goblins opposite Harry, "How would you like to start, Mr. Potter?" Harry had came prepared for how to allow the conversation to flow. "Tell me first all you consider important, Mr. Sharptooth. After learning all that is to learn from you, I will decide how to continue further." Sharptooth nodded and took a deep breath and questioned, "I assume that you have all the knowledge about how our wizarding world functions and the role many of the old families play in the Wizarding Council, also called Wizengamot." Harry nodded in agreement. Sharptooth continued, "Very well. The Wizarding Council was formed to govern the magical Britain almost 1,000 years ago during the time of Hogwarts founders, King Arthur, Merlin Emery/Ambrosius, etc. Over the years this structure has been modified or changed with some major or minor changes. The latest one, which functions now, is not more than 250 years old. But even during these changes, what did not change in the Wizarding Council was the power many of the families possessed. But even so, the current Wizengamot is the most democratic one since its founding." Harry nodded, indicating to continue. Though he knew all these, he allowed Sharptooth to build up the background and did not interrupt him. "Now coming to you, Mr. Potter, your family, the Potter family, is a most ancient and most noble family. And in case of most ancient and most noble families, the Ministry of Magic has little say about the term of inheritances, heirs, and lordship," added Sharptooth. He stated, "Your great-grandfather and grandfather Charles Potter were brilliant minds. They specifically attributed in your family charter that in case that the family has no lord and the current heir is not of age to take over the lordship of the family, the magical guardian of the said heir will have no say whatsoever for the family vault. They could at most regulate the trust vault which is set up for every next generation heir. Not only that, they also added that if no member of the family is left behind, then all the vaults of the Potter family is to be sealed shut for 3 centuries using ancient magic, and after the prescribed time all the wealth and family heirlooms are to be distributed as per wishes of Gringotts," added Sharptooth. Harry was keenly listening, and without any implications he understood how clever that was of his grandfather and ancestors. Sharptooth explained, "This regulation bound the hand of Dumbledore from siphoning of any major funds. Not only that, it forced stop eyeing your wealth from killing you, as that would seal shut the vaults for 300 years. To say the least, even before your parents' death, Dumbledore has been systematically trying to weaken the autonomy the old families have over their inheritances and their functioning. But since the Wizengamot is practically governed by these families, he had been mostly unsuccessful. After all, even the so-called light families that are in Dumbledore's camp would not be willing to give away their powers so easily." Sharptooth sighed, "But now since the war many families have ceased to exist or are on the verge of extinction. Slowly Dumbledore will gather enough influence to wield a 2/3 majority in the Wizengamot and would probably change the laws as he wishes." Harry nodded, "But not any of it is a crime." Sharptooth nodded, "Yes. None of it is actually a crime. He is only trying to bring regulation to reduce the power of evil purebloods and guilt-trapping the light families in voting his favor. Now that I have informed you about Dumbledore machinations, we must talk about your trust vaults," added Sharptooth. "But before that, let me tell you one thing. I have not told you all about Dumbledore manipulations, and I cannot do so because of Goblin's magical oath to remain neutral in wizarding politics. I could only tell you what directly affected you and your family, since that much scope is left for any account manager of ancient families. So, you must discover other things on your own," continued Sharptooth. Harry nodded in understanding. Sharptooth said, "Now Mr. Potter, on your parents' death Dumbledore, using his position of Chief Warlock, got your parents' will sealed." He continued, "Ideally this should have not been possible. But using the war as prelude, Dumbledore passed many regulations allowing the Chief Warlock many discretionary powers. But even so, sealing the will should have not been possible. But after the death of your grandparents, James Potter never took up his lordship. So, their will were never treated as a will of Lord of most ancient and most noble families, but as a mere member of most ancient and most noble families." Harry's face tightened in anger. Even the last wishes of their parents were not allowed. He was not allowed the last words of his parents. Sharptooth sighed in sadness, "No one knows why your father never took up the lordship of your family. It was more than 11 months between your grandparents' demise and that Halloween night. But honestly speaking, I would not deny Dumbledore's manipulation even behind this as well. Your father was too trusting of Albus Dumbledore. Harry nodded solemnly. Even he could not deny Dumbledore's involvement, after all he himself has been the victim to Dumbledore's manipulations. Chapter 22, More Truth. July 1994. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Sharptooth picked up the conversation. After your parents' demise and their will being sealed, Dumbledore again using his power as Chief Warlock took over the position of your magical guardian. And that way he gained access to your trust vaults. And how much money has Dumbledore taken out of my trust vault? Asked Harry instantly. Mr. Potter, even though Dumbledore has control over your trust vaults, he cannot take out money indiscriminately. He must provide proper reasons for it. So he approved of 20 gold coins a month for your monthly expenditure, which was discontinued after you joined Hogwarts. And 20 gold coins a month, I must say, is more than enough to live like a king, informed Sharptooth. Harry almost lost control at this. He had been living understairs inside a cupboard and Dumbledore took 20 gold coins a month for his expenditure. And seeing your reaction and the condition you were in the last time, you never lived a life worth 20 gold coins a month, commented Sharptooth. Harry nodded in agreement but did not divulge any information. Sharptooth continued, over the years aside from these monthly withdrawals, Dumbledore withdrew gold coins on your birthdays. There are also many sudden expenses, but since they were not too much considering your wealth and the fact that Dumbledore has the ministry in his pockets, we never brought up this to ministry or the council, as Dumbledore would have easily brushed up these expenses as reasonable. He added, for the last 3 years Dumbledore has made no more withdrawals. All the withdrawals except your first withdrawal have been made by Mrs. Molly Weasley. And that total amounts to 1,400 gold coins. He continued without waiting for Harry's reply, and I assume you received very small portion of it. Harry nodded in agreement. Sharptooth said, this is all from my side, Mr. Potter. Now you can decide about what to do. But I must caution that since you yourself are not of age, you have very limited control even on yourself. Though you can try to charge Molly and Dumbledore with theft, the charges will hardly hold. Firstly, because Dumbledore withdrew money as your magical guardian and Molly did so with your knowledge and probably with the permission of your magical guardian. It was your foolishness to allow Molly to do so. Secondly, Dumbledore have enough sway everywhere that you will laugh if you charge him with the theft few thousand gold coins. He continued, though there are ways that allow wizards not of age to take up lordship, Dumbledore would never allow any of the ways to go through. Harry could only nod. Though Sharptooth was wrong about one thing, and he did not correct the goblin immediately. Primitive families like Peveril had no age-bound requirements to take the family lordship. And the Wizarding Council could never change this law even with the full majority. The Wizarding Council charter clearly stated that to change laws about the functioning of the primitive families, 2/3 majority of these primitive family was required. And even to change the charter of the Wizarding Council, 2/3 majority of the primitive families was required, and so, no matter how many times the Wisengamot was restructured, this particular clause could not be removed without the 2/3 majority of primitive families. None of the books Harry had brought mentioned anything about the primitive families. Even families like Gryffindor were only known to be a most ancient and most noble families. And since the seats of the primitive families had been empty for centuries, no one in general really knew the difference. Though Harry was sure that such knowledge was deep secret, and highly placed people who had in-depth knowledge about the council and its working and its charter must be aware about that particular information. And since Harry was already Lord Peveril, he would be considered to be of age for other requirements too. Sharptooth would soon learn this, since he was going to take his position as Lord Potter now. He himself was very well aware that no much how he wished he could not actually prove anything. Dumbledore was no old fool playing the game. He was a seasoned politician and a powerful wizard and the leader of the light. People feared him, awed at his achievements. Harry stated, for the time being I do not wish to take any action. If Molly Weasley comes again to withdraw the gold coins, can you inform her that her key is not working due to some technicalities? Ask her that only a new key can gain access to the vault, and that can be made after confirming my identity. I do not want to know them that I have gained access to my family legacy. Sharptooth contemplated, though we do not lie, I think since the key was yours and it was closed on your direction, that can be called a technicality. Very well, said Harry. Mr. Sharptooth, I want to do an inheritance test, requested Harry. Sharptooth frowned, are you sure, Mr. Potter? I doubt that you would inherit any other family. Maybe Black, but not any other. Your father was eligible only for Potter lordship, and a far-fetched claim on Black family, and your mother did not take an inheritance test, though since she was a Muggle-born, I doubt you would gain anything from her side. And even if you do, that would be of no use as you cannot take any lordship till you are 17. Harry nodded in affirmation. I would like for the inheritance test. Sharptooth smiled, very well. Follow me. With this he stood up and walked outside of the room. Chapter 23, Inheritances. July 1994. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The human and goblin duo of Sharptooth and Harry, after a long journey on the cartwheel, which brought them deep inside Gringotts, arrived in an extremely large room. The ceiling of the room was so high, that Harry felt like he was almost looking in the sky. Placed in the center of room was an square-shaped altar. At the top of the altar was a bowl made of some kind of red crystal. Sharptooth and Harry both arrived near the altar. Sharptooth started, Mr. Potter, you know there was a time when ritual was as common as wand magic in the wizarding world. But slowly the Ministry and the Wizengamot started to fear powerful people. So instead to finding ways to get powerful, they started to clip every powerful magica and rituals. Everything they feared or did not understood was classified as dark magic. He sighed, this inheritance ritual is the one and only legally allowed blood ritual. Sharptooth then gestured, and understanding what he meant, Harry picked up the silver knife placed next to the bowl. With a slice of the knife his palm was split open and blood trickled down in the bowl. After few drops of blood, the bowl started to glow. The bowl continued to glow for few moments, and then 5 lines emerged from the bowl and was connected to 5 different locations. The first line was blood red in color, which traced to Jamie Potter and Lily Evans. Another line emerged from James Potter which connected to Charles Potter and Doria Black Potter. Lily had no lines emerging from her name. The second line was a dashed line in red blood color which was connected to 2 names. One Sirius Black and other being Doria Black. The third line was purely golden and was connected to 3 names, Antioch Peveril, Cadmus Peveril, and Ignotus Peveril. The fourth line was again purely golden which was connected to one single name, Godric Gryffindor. The fifth line was again purely golden which was connected to Salazar Slytherin. After the lines were connected to names, the wall in front of the altar pulsed and engravings appeared on the wall. Harry James Potter. Lord Peveril. Lord Potter, lordship not claimed. Lord Black, lordship not claimed. Lord Gryffindor, lordship not claimed. Lord Slytherin, lordship not claimed. Sharptooth and Harry both stared at wall in shock and astonishment. After few moments, Sharptooth composed himself and howled with laughter, Mr. Potter, I must say you played well. Really played well. Harry still not able to overcome him astonishment, how? Haha, laughed Sharptooth, this will need some explanation to do. Harry nodded, explain please. Sharptooth snapped his finger and 2 chairs appeared out of nowhere in one end of the room. He gestured and Harry took his seat. Now you are already Lord Peveril, Mr. Potter, so no explanation required here, started Sharptooth, but I must say, you played me well by hiding that fact. Harry simply nodded and waited for the explanation to continue. Sharptooth continued, same is the case with Potter family. There are no surprises here. Now about Black family, we will discuss that in last. Sharptooth continued further, now about the Gryffindor and Slytherin family. Just like the Peveril family, you have been chosen as the magical heir of Salazar Slytherin and Godric Gryffindor. The blood red lines in the Potter family indicated blood relation while the golden light represents magical heir. Why me? Questioned Harry. That is something I don't know, Mr. Potter. I assume that you know about the reason for you being Peveril heir, answered Sharptooth. Harry nodded but did not divulge any information. Now about the Blacks, continued Sharptooth, is a complex matter. Isn't Sirius Black supposed to be the Black Lord? Questioned Harry. In an ideal scenario, yes. But since he was in Azkaban he never took up the lordship, said Sharptooth. Remembering about Sirius' innocence, Harry felt a rage welling up inside him. But he kept his neutral expression and did not let anything show on his face. Sharptooth continued, after Sirius there are 2 other people who could have take Black lordship. Draco Malfoy through Narcissa Black and you through Doria Black. Sharptooth sighed, but Mr. Potter your case is bit exceptional. Since you gained lordship of a primitive family your claim to any other inheritance was strengthened. Since Black lordship was empty, you became the rightful lord. Harry took a minute to digest all the information. Though he had a understanding of certain privileges he had being a lord of primitive family, this was something he had no idea. Even so he did not wanted to take something which rightfully belonged to Sirius. And if I don't want the Black Lordship? Questioned Harry. You must claim what magic had dictated to you, Mr. Potter, said Sharptooth. He continued before Harry could interrupt, but I can understand why you would detest the Black Lordship. So there is only one way, you must banish yourself from the Black family. Sirius would then be Lord Black, commented Harry. Sharptooth shook his head. No, Mr. Potter. There is no guarantee. Magic is not a simple thing. It has been years when Mr. Black should have claimed his lordship, but since he had not done so, his claim was weakening day by day. And now since his claim was breached and you were chosen as Lord Black, there is little chance he will be Lord Black. Draco Malfoy will have greater claim than Sirius in this scenario. He continued, and even if somehow Sirius Black is able to claim his lordship, he has no heir. And I doubt that after his stay in Azkaban, and even if he is able to deceive everyone and be on run, he will have chance to wed and give birth to a heir. Sharptooth sighed. Ultimately now or sometime later, Draco Malfoy will definitely become Lord Black. Harry sat there in consideration for few minutes. On one hand he did want to snatch something from Sirius, on the other hand he could not allow black fortune and influence to fall in hands of Draco Malfoy. Finally, he declared, I will take Black Lordship. Sharptooth grinned in response. Chapter 24, Lord's Ring. July 1994. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. I, Harry James Potter, son of James Charles Potter and Lily Evans Potter, hereby claim the lordship of Potter family. I claim myself to be as the true heir of the Potter family. I claim to take my duties as Potter Lord, sincerely and responsibly. Similarly, Harry took the oath for the lordship for the Black, Gryffindor, and Slytherin family. With this, Harry now stood as the most powerful person, politically, with 36 votes. 8 votes each for the 3 primitive families of Peveril, Gryffindor, and Slytherin. 6 votes each for the most ancient and most noble family of Potter and Black. Now, Mr. Potter, as you taken over the lordship of the families, you should go to the respective vaults of the families and take over the Lord Ring for each family. Meanwhile, I will prepare a catalogue for the Potter and the Black fortunes. Also, I will see that if we have some kind of catalogue for the Peveril, Gryffindor, and Slytherin family, said Sharptooth. Both Sharptooth and Potter left the room and arrived in the previous room. Without saying anything, Sharptooth took his seat and started to scribble furiously on a parchment. After scribbling for few moments, he rang a bell and Ranuk came running inside in few moments. Sharptooth handed the parchment to Ranuk, and it few moments for the young goblin to scan what was written in the parchment. Ranuk had a rather hilarious reaction. He stared at parchment for 1 second, then Harry for another second. Ranuk repeated the same process for few moments. Only after a sharp glare from Sharptooth, Ranuk started to behave normal. Take Mr. Potter to his vaults, instructed Sharptooth to Ranuk. Sharptooth then parted ways with Ranuk and Harry. The goblin and human duo took another long cart ride to arrive in some of the deepest parts of the Gringotts. Peveril, Gryffindor, and Slytherin were among the first of the few vaults to be opened in Gringotts. I would also say that these are some of the best protected vaults we have in Gringotts. To be honest, we have had lost any hopes that these vaults will ever be opened again, informed Ranuk to Harry. With their casual conversation, mostly Ranuk describing tales about Gringotts, the duo arrived at their destination. From where Harry stood, he could see around dozen vault gates with the crest of their families engraved upon the gates of the vault. The first gate in his line of sight was of the Peveril family. The legendary symbol of the Deathly Hallows carved upon the gates. A circle inside a triangle with a straight line dividing the triangle and the circle in 2 equal parts. Harry walked forward towards the gate and placed his palm on the center of the crest. He felt a prickly sensation in his palm, and moments later the gate glowed and moved sideways with a loud creak. Harry could only imagine if someone who was not the Peveril Lord tried his way inside, what would become of that person. Harry moved inside and was shocked by the sight he saw inside. The vault from inside was humongous and piles of gold galleons were scattered inside. Harry could not even imagine the amount of the galleons he had inside his vaults. At other side of the vault, all different kinds of weapons hung on the wall. At another place, hundreds of books were kept arranged on a wooden shelf. Harry for now ignored all other things and arrived at the center of the room. At the center was a raised stone platform, and on the platform lay the ring of the Peveril Lord. Harry brought his palm forward near the ring and felt erratic magic pulses around his palm, magic judging his identity. The pulses calmed after some moment and the ring jumped and was on Harry's index finger. Harry took another glance at the vault and exited. Harry repeated the same process for the remaining 4 vaults of Gryffindor, Slytherin, Potter, and Black. He now wore 5 rings on his index finger, and since the magic was such a wonderful thing, the rings combined into one and turned invisible until he wanted any of the rings to appear. Harry found 2 more things inside the Slytherin and Gryffindor vault. One thin diary was placed near the Lord Ring on the raised platform of the Slytherin and Gryffindor vault. Assuming that the diary was important since it was placed near the Lord Ring and was probably meant for the next Lord, Harry pocketed the diary to view them later in leisure. When the goblin duo of Ranuk and Harry arrived back in the previous room, Sharptooth was already waiting for them. In front of him on the table a small pile of documents was placed. "Did everything go well, Mr. Potter?" questioned Sharptooth. Harry nodded, "Yes." Sharptooth smiled while Harry took his seat and Ranuk left the room. "Now here is the catalogue of the various properties you own as the Lord of the 5 families. You can take them home and go through them in detail," said Sharptooth. He continued, "Now as the account manager of Potter family I have managed the investment of the Potter fortunes as well as I could on my discretion. But since there was no Lord Potter, my hands were tied and things have remained stagnant over a long time. You should study them in detail and we can discuss few things in our next meeting," stated Sharptooth. Harry nodded in response. "Also Mr. Potter, you need to appoint an account manager for your other families. The Black family had their account managers, but the line of that particular Goblin family went extinct 3 years earlier, leaving the Black family manager-less. The remaining 3 families of Peveril, Gryffindor, and Slytherin had no account manager in a millennium," added Sharptooth. "Can't you manage these accounts as well?" questioned Harry. Sharptooth grinned happily, "Thank you that you considered me, Mr. Potter, but no goblin can take more than 3 vaults to manage of most ancient and noble or higher rank. So even if do take up I can take 2 more of the families, Mr. Potter. You must find someone else for the remaining 2. Harry felt in contemplation. "I will leave it like this and discuss it in our next meeting. I would also request you to prepare a list of goblins whom you consider able for the job." Sharptooth nodded, and with this Harry returned home. Chapter 25, Letters. July 1994. Peveril Manor. Harry was sitting in his study in Peveril Manor. When he had returned back from Gringotts he was astonished to find the kitchen was filled to brim by all different kind of food supplies. Dobby was excited to cook something for Harry, and feeling tired, Harry asked for some light refreshments. In his study, on the table was all the documents he had received from Sharptooth. For now, he kept those documents aside and picked up the 2 diaries from Gryffindor and Slytherin vault. He opened the Gryffindor's diary first. "Hello and warm greetings. Whoever you are reading, since you are reading this means you are now Lord Gryffindor. Congratulations. You must be confused. Why you? At least you must be knowing that you are my magical heir, so whether you are my blood descendant or not, does not matter. Let me begin by telling you a story. I, along with Salazar Slytherin, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff, established the greatest magical school the world had ever seen. There were not too many begin with, and I don't know if it will survive when you are reading this. But even so, for all the 4 of us, magic was always greater than blood. Over our magical lives we had greater wealth, and most importantly we were owners of Hogwarts, and we did not want to leave all hard work in some worthless hands just because they claimed to be my blood descendant. So the 4 of us decided to leave behind a quest, some kind of test, and whoever cleared the test would be our heir. We never told each other what the test would be designs. But since you are now Lord Gryffindor I can give you some hints. Helga is the most compassionate and the gentle soul among all of us. Her test must be to do something with compassion. Rowena is embodiment of wit and cunning. Shocked, right? After all, this is Salazar's trait. But she is Rowena. She is brilliant. Her test must be something with wit. Then finally Salazar. He is among the greatest wizard I have ever seen. Brave, fiercely intelligent, and powerful. His test must be the most dangerous of all, and only a madman would take it, and I doubt some would even be able to clear that. While I am writing this letter, Salazar had taken retirement from Hogwarts for his research and adventures, and we have not heard from him in a while. Rumors have started to float that he has turned evil and have abandoned Hogwarts. I cannot stop laughing at this. Then finally mine. For me, bravery and courage in face of danger was always the best of traits a person could ever have. And who is braver than a wizard/witch without a wand facing a life-threatening situation? When a person without their source of power, wand, would face his death bravely without faltering for the protection of innocence, would wield the greatest goblin-forged sword, the sword of Gryffindor. The wielder of Gryffindor's sword would be judged as my heir and new Lord Gryffindor. I hope while reading you must be proudly displaying the symbol of your bravery tied to your waist. Godric Gryffindor. Harry read the letter in complete daze. He did not even have a minuscule guess that his wielding of the Gryffindor's sword was such a significant event. He took some minutes to process all the information from the letter and composed himself again. He then turned the page of the diary. The rest of the diary was filled with the description of the experiences of Godric Gryffindor along with his understanding of magical theory. He took a quick glance at them and kept aside the diary to view the rest of content, some time later. He then proceeded to read Slytherin's diary. Congratulations Lord Slytherin. To be able to take up the mantle of Lord Slytherin you must be one hell of wizard. Someone really worthy to be my heir. The letter continued describing how he founded Hogwarts and why they decided to leave their inheritance for their magical heir. I have already left Hogwarts while writing this letter. The insignificant mob thinks me to be an evil wizard and I only laugh in their faces. My dream is to create a safe world for the wizards and witches. Do I hate the muggles? Yes, to some extent. Do I hate muggle-born wizards/witches? Absolutely not. I absolutely adore them. Only the pure bloods will never keep the wizarding society alive. Muggle-born wizards/witches are the pillar on which our society would stand and strive. Now onto my test. They thought I would devise the toughest of the test and I did the same. I am Parselmouth. The abilities a Parselmouth can acquire are just incredible. And I am very fond of snakes, a particular kind of snake. The deadliest one, but the most magnificent one too. Basilisk. There is a basilisk protector roaming the hidden chamber of Hogwarts. To be my heir you must find that chamber and take control over the basilisk. Get its full obedience just like I have. Since you are Lord Slytherin, I must say that to get the full obedience of the basilisk must have been incredibly difficult. I had acquired it when the basilisk was just a baby but now it is enormous. I must respect you for your magical powers to subdue the mind of such a magnificent creature. Take care of my little snake. Though I had given it a name you must have given a new one and that is what it must be called. Salazar Slytherin. Harry was beyond shocked reading the letter. The basilisk was never meant to be killed. And why did Salazar call it a protector? And if Riddle had the control over Basilisk, how did he become Lord Slytherin? Chapter 26, Quest of Slytherin Lordship. July 1994. Peveril Manor. Another week passed in Peveril Manor for Harry. The manor had gone through a huge transformation in a single week. Without any constraint of wealth, Dobby had completely changed the look of the manor. Expensive item of decorations was procured and placed all around. All kind of exquisite flowers and plants had been planted in the garden area of the manor. The kitchen in the manor was fully functional and Dobby was enjoying cooking food for Harry Sir. For Harry this was something unique. He had never felt so comfortable and so relaxed since his birth. In the week Harry continued to study more books and continued his research about the magical world and all things related to it. The first thing Harry investigated was about him getting Slytherin lordship. He went through Voldemort's memories in very detail. The first thing he concluded that Tom Riddle never had any kind of obedience from the basilisk. The first time Riddle met the basilisk only indulged with Riddle because he was a Parselmouth. Riddle tested the basilisk through his words and found out that the mighty creature had no intention of harming any innocent person. Contrary to what everyone believed, the basilisk was there to protect the Hogwarts in case of an attack against the Hogwarts. Harry confirmed the same from the Salazar's diary. The first time Tom Riddle released the basilisk which resulted in death of Moaning Myrtle, he had fooled the basilisk in believing Hogwarts under attack. Drowning in guilt of killing an innocent, the basilisk was seething in anger and it wanted nothing less than to tear apart Tom Riddle. But Riddle was no slouch. He was determined to control the basilisk. Tom knew that if somehow he got the basilisk under control, taking over the wizarding world would be a lot easier. With the basilisk at his back no one would dare to oppose. Tom Riddle then went through all kind of abhorrent mind-controlling rituals and arts. Riddle was a master in mind arts but the basilisk was no ordinary creature. During the entire war Riddle had gotten no control over the basilisk. The basilisk was instead corrupted due to the side effect of the rituals and lost its mind and had no sanity left. Even during Harry's second year, Voldemort had no control over the snake and all what happened was mindless attacks provoked by Voldemort's Parselmouth speech to the insane basilisk. Since the basilisk was corrupted, no one had any chance to get the full obedience of the basilisk and the Slytherin lordship. But magic was sentient. The ritual adjusted itself and turned the requirement into literal conquest of the might basilisk. And when Harry slew the basilisk, Harry completed the ritual and gained lordship of Slytherin. Harry could only feel sorry for the basilisk. Salazar had asked his heir to take care of the little snake. The protector of the Hogwarts was turned into an evil and dark creature roaming the Hogwarts. The respect which the snake deserved was turned into fear and hatred for the basilisk. Other than this, Harry went through all the documents Sharptooth had provided him. And he discovered one thing: he was rich. Filthy rich. He had millions and millions of gold galleons in all his vaults combined. Other than this, he owned various shops and shares of many different establishments, in both the Wizarding Britain, Muggle world, and even in some different countries. Along these documents, Harry had discovered 2 different kinds of cards. Both cards were metal made. From the description, Harry understood their function. One was a magical gold card. He could use this card to spend galleons in the magical world on almost all establishments and shops, relieving him from carrying coins all time. The second card was a Muggle counterpart to it. He could use this card to shop in the Muggle world. The card was provided by a partner of Gringotts. He also owned various houses, manors, and residences from the Potter and Black Fortune. Potter Manor was the ancestral manors of Potters which Harry had yet to visit. He also owned 12 Grimmauld Place, Godric's Hollow, among various other properties. The other thing which happened was that Harry got 3 letters, one each from Sirius, Ron, and Hermione. Harry had placed a simple set of wards tied to the blood ward on number 4 Privet Drive, which resulted in Indiana all his letters being delivered to the attic in 4 Privet Drive, and Dobby was quick to retrieve them. Sirius had sent a rather small letter describing how he had escaped the European continent and moved in the tropics. He further felt bad that he could spend no time with his godson. Harry sent a simple letter in response asking him to take care and remain in contact. He did not tell anything about the Black Lordship to Sirius and decided to keep it until they meet again. For now, he was working on the plan to get Sirius free of his charges and crime. Hermione sent a letter describing so much information. She went on great length to describe how she had already read ahead and was preparing for the next year. After her story, she fired numerous questions towards Harry, asking him various things. Harry had chuckled seeing her letter and had sent enough lengthy reply. Though Harry talked about various things in his letter, he gave no hint about his changed life to Hermione. Harry could only wonder where did she get an owl to write a letter to him, but his dilemma was solved when the same owl delivered his letter from Ron. Hermione must have used the owl when Ron would have sent her a letter. The third letter from Ron Weasley was about him inviting Harry to Quidditch final, which was to be held later in August, and then spend rest of summer vacation at the Burrows. Ron had also told that they, Molly Weasley, had tried to contact him via Muggle post but got no reply. Not wanting to raise any suspicion, Harry wrote a simple letter that everything was fine and he would talk about the invitation with his uncle and would send a reply to Ron. Chapter 27, Going to Quidditch World Cup Final. August 1994. Peveril Manor. A month has passed since Harry took up his multiple lordships. A lot has happened in this month. Firstly, on Sharptooth recommendation, Harry had chosen a goblin called Hunduke, to manage his Black and Slytherin accounts, while Sharptooth would manage Potter, Gryffindor, and Peveril accounts. Teaming up with the 2 goblins, he had gone through all his investments and finances. Though not an expert in finance, Harry had done well enough to ensure a good income from all the investment. There were a few investments which had turned bad over the decade, and Harry had either salvaged them or pumped in more money if it stood a chance to stand up again. Harry Potter in the preceding month had also visited the Potter Manor and was surprised to find 3 house elves in the manor who were waiting for their lord. According to their story, they had felt when James had died and they immediately wanted to find young Harry. But some kind of barrier stopped them from sensing his presence, and they also found no news about Harry in the Wizarding world, other than that he was safe and was celebrated as hero of the Wizarding world. Harry had seethed at this, knowing it was because of Dumbledore's wards. Harry was sure that his house elves would have done so much better in taking care of him than the Dursleys. Harry questioned them that why did they not contact him when started to attend the Hogwarts. To this what they replied broke Harry's heart and rage filled his body. Timsy stated, "Young Master Harry, with no lord, we had no direct connection with the Potter family. Generally, the previous connection sustains for long enough to give ample time for new lord to form the bond, but in over a decade the bond was almost gone." She almost cried, and with no connection and magic we were dying. The Potter Manor had ample magic to sustain us, and though we could not sense the connection, we had a very thin connection with you, since you are last remaining Potter. We are very weak now and could hardly perform any kind of magic, and we could not leave this house. Toffee, the other elf sobbed, "We waited for you to come, young master. For 3 years we were waiting, but you did not come, but we did not give hope." Terry, the third elf continued, but few days back we sensed our connection to the Potter family magic getting stronger. We knew that you have taken up the mantle of Lord Potter and you would come. Harry immediately renewed the bonds with the three elf and they were so excited on finding their new lord. In the beginning the Potter elves had some sort of rivalry in Service Harry, but ultimately they made up and together the four of them took care of the Potter Manor and Peveril Manor. For now, he did not visit any other of his residences. He did not want Dumbledore to get any wind of him visiting his houses, which he should have no idea about. As for Potter Manor, since it was ancestral Potter Manor, it was laced with strong wards and with no lord, the manor was in lockdown. Even Dumbledore had no access to them and Harry did not lift up the lockdown of the manor. Today was the day he was going to the Quidditch World Cup final. He had initially wanted to refuse the invitation but ultimately decided to attend such a large magical gathering. The Weasleys had wanted to pick up him from 4 Privet Drive but Harry had informed them that his uncle and aunt would not like their presence in their home. He asked them to meet up in the Diagon Alley. Harry stared his reflection in the manor. Gone was the baggy and second-hand clothes Harry used to wear. Instead, it was replaced by regal clothes suited for lords. Harry dressed himself in Muggle style. With a pop Harry disapparated from the Peveril Manor. August 1994. Diagon Alley. Harry apparat in Diagon Alley. With confident strides he walked towards Florian Fortescue, the ice cream parlour in the Diagon Alley. He took a seat in the parlour and waited for Arthur Weasley, who was designated to pick up Harry. He was waiting and it appeared to Harry that he was here early. Wanting to taste the magical ice cream of the wizarding world he looked around to find someone to order something, but from the corner of his eyes he caught a familiar face. Penelope Clearwater. Harry completely turned around to see her and was stunned. Penelope was serving as a waitress at the parlour. She was a top student at Hogwarts and head girl in her final year and prefect before that. Harry had no personal relationship with her and whatever he knew about her was only through Percy Weasley. He was about to approach her when he spotted Arthur Weasley approaching with his trademark red hair. Harry turned back away and greeted Arthur, "Greetings Mr. Weasley." Arthur greeted back, "Good morning, Harry. Have you arrived all right?" Harry nodded, "Yes Mr. Weasley." Arthur questioned back, "How was your summer, Harry? You seem to have a growth spurt this year." Arthur commented seeing the grown height of Harry. Harry smiled, "I have been well this summer. And yes, I do seem to have gained few inches." Arthur then took out a white handkerchief from his coat, "This is a porte-clés to our destination. Do you know what is it?" Harry nodded and Arthur responded, "Very well. Hold my hand." Harry took Arthur's hand and Arthur said, "Quidditch," activating the porte-clés. Harry felt a pull in his navel and the duo of the wizard disappeared from Diagon Alley. Chapter 28, Meeting Old Friends. August 1994. Quidditch World Cup venue. With a swirl Harry and Arthur arrived in a green field. Both of them trudged towards two tired-looking wizards. Arthur greeted his co-workers from the ministry and with direction from the two wizards, Harry and Arthur started their trek towards the campsite. Arthur said, "Everyone has already arrived at the site. Hermione have been staying with us since last few days and will remain here till she goes Hogwarts." He questioned, "Are you sure your uncle would not allow you to stay with us? Maybe I can talk with him." Harry shook his head in calm manner, "No Mr. Weasley. He will not allow me. And I don't think he will like if you talk to him. I mean he hate everything magical." Arthur wanted to suggest something more but, in the end, kept quiet. Harry for now was keeping very careful eyes on Arthur and he was going to do the same for each of the Weasleys. For now, he only knew about Molly stealing his money. He was also not sure about how deep Weasley's involvement ran in the plan of them getting his attention at the King Cross station in his first year. He had to find out that if they were actually involved or had Dumbledore manipulated them somehow by using his old wise words. He wanted to find out if other Weasleys were also involved in this and if they had plotted something else against him. Though stealing his money was not something he could easily forgive but he could still bear with it, but if they were involved in other plots, Harry would react suitably. For now, he certainly hoped that nothing new comes out and at least Ron turns out to be his true friend. Despite all his shortcomings, Ron was still the first friend he had made. Soon the duo reached a muggle who muttered about strange things happening around, people with weird attires and many other things. Checking their names on the list, the man guided them towards their destination. Immediately an aura arrived and obliviated the man of his memories about the weird things. The aura also casually mentioned that he had already obliviated the man 10 times till now. Harry internally scoffed at this, thinking how casual was it for a wizard to mess with a muggle's mind and have no worry about his consequences. Harry was certain that using mind arts by someone who was not a specialist was dangerous, and even if performed correctly, such consecutive obliviations in a short span was going to cause some decent damage to the man. Though Harry could not do anything and only pray that the man remains fine. Arthur and Harry arrived in the area designated for the tents, and Harry could see numerous tents all along. Both of the duo moved forward and climbed the hill, finally arriving at a good location, where were 2 tents placed, with Weasley inscribed on them. Harry almost let out a chuckle witnessing the shabby attempts of the wizards hiding magic from muggles when their tents were screaming of magic. Despite this, Harry was impressed seeing the 2 Weasleys' tent. It appeared fully supported by non-magical means. Harry was certain Hermione had a great role to play into this. Immediately Ron and Hermione came walking with a kettle in their hands carrying water. They placed the kettle immediately and arrived near Harry. Hermione instantly enveloped Harry in her crushing bear hug. "Oh! Harry, how have you been? And why can't you stay at the burrow for the remainder of the summer? And how have you grown so much?" Harry chuckled at his friend's enthusiasm. "I am fine, Hermione. And it seems I have had good diet this year and my uncle won't allow me stay at burrow." Ron stepped forward and without any greeting muttered, "Harry, how are you wearing such costly clothes? Where did you got this from?" Jealousy was clearly visible on his face, and even Hermione frowned a little. And Harry added to his mental list that people surrounding him noticed his clothes, but till now no one had tried to get him away from the rags he wore. Harry answered calmly, "Good morning, Ron." Ron turned little red in embarrassment of not doing any proper greeting. Harry continued, "My uncle was quite happy this summer, so he allowed me to buy an expensive piece of cloth. I thought this would be fine for this occasion." Ron nodded but did not speak anything. Arthur broke the awkward silence. "Why don't we go inside and look the tent?" The trio of children nodded and went inside the boys' tent. The tent appeared to be like a 3-room flat but was small compared to what Harry had been enjoying in the last month. In the main area, Fred, George, and Ginny were sitting. Ginny was lost in her own worlds while the twins were smiling mischievously. "Morning, Fred, George, Ginny," greeted Harry. The 3 of them returned the greetings and inquired about Harry's well-being. "You seem to have grown quite taller, Harry," said one of the twins. "It seems I will be hearing this compliment a lot," chuckled Harry in response. Arthur injected, "Harry, Ron and all of you, let us move outside. We must cook something for us to eat and drink. Bill, Charlie, and Percy would be joining us shortly. And remember, no magic." Everyone then followed Arthur outside when Ron walked side by side of Harry. Forgetting all his previous embarrassments, Ron informed Harry, "You know Percy have gotten a job at the Ministry of Magic assigned to Department of International Cooperation." Harry replied, "That is nice. Congratulations." Ron scoffed disdain clear for his older brother. Harry was about to ask about Penelope when Arthur called Ron and he ran away. Chapter 29, Putting Down Malfoy. August 1994. Quidditch World Cup venue. Arthur took lead in preparing food and tea. Being excited as he always was, prohibited complete use of any kind of magic. He used Muggle matchbox to light fire and had quite a fun using them. One by one Percy, Bill, and Charlie arrived at the location. Arthur continued to introduce a lot of ministry people while Percy continued describing about his job. Harry could not help but chuckle when he noticed that Percy's nose was much sharper and pointed sky high. Percy could not stop bragging how he was dealing with so much responsibilities. "Mr. Crouch trusts me a lot more," continued Percy. "He has been very busy recently with all the different things happening and a lot of work is being handed to me. It is hard to get free time these days." Harry caught Fred and George rolling their eyes. Percy was about to continue more when Arthur stood up. "Ah! Boys, here is the man of the moment, Ludo Bagman." Harry caught a man striding forward towards their direction. He was one of the most noticeable man in the crowd, and Harry could confidently say that he wore extremely strange attires even by standards of wizard. Ludo Bagman laughed. "Oh, Arthur. Hello, hello." Arthur smiled. "These are my children, Bill, Charlie, Fred, no George, he is Fred." Then Percy, Ron, and Ginny. He pointed towards Hermione, "And she is Hermione Granger, Ron's classmate, and he is Harry Potter." Ludo's eyes instantly moved towards Harry's forehead to find the famous scar, but Harry could see the slight disappointment in Bagman's eyes, on seeing Harry's forehead covered with his messy black hair. Harry smiled in response and took Ludo's extended hand to give a firm handshake. Arthur continued, "And you all must be knowing Ludo Bagman, head of Department of Magical Games and Sports." Thanks to him we got the tickets. He is also a former Quidditch player and have represented England. Ludo then took his seat on the grass and was immediately offered snacks and tea. Soon time flowed. Ludo asked to place a bet. Arthur placed a bet of 1 galleon on Ireland, while the twins something more than 37 galleons on Ireland winning and Crumb catching the snitch, despite Arthur trying to stop them. Soon they were joined by Barty Crouch for a brief moment. Percy could not stop himself fawning over Crouch while it took all of Harry's acclumency to stop himself from lashing at Crouch. He was one of the people responsible for Sirius' false imprisonment as he was head of DMLE then and did not give a proper trial to Sirius. Ludo then described about some event about to happen at Hogwarts but Crouch intercepted him midway saying that any information is not to be released till Ministry decides, leaving everyone curious. Even Arthur only smiled when the children questioned him. Crouch departed soon but not before calling Percy, Weatherby, making the Weasley burst out in laughing. After having their dinner, the group crossed the woods and arrived near an opening, seats 100,000, informed Arthur. He continued, the Ministry has been working to construct the stadium for a year. They soon showed their tickets at the entrance and were then guided towards the top section of the stands in the VIP box. Entering the VIP box, Harry found that a lot of people have already arrived in the box. Arthur shook hands with a lot of people who were important Ministry officials and Percy tried to garner as much attention he could by introducing himself loudly enough. Soon entered in the Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic accompanied by his Bulgarian counterpart. Percy was the first to his feet. Good evening, Minister. I am Percy Weasley, newly appointed in Department of International Magical Cooperation. Fudge gave a small nod to Percy and strode forward towards Harry and offered his hands. Harry. How are you? Harry smiled at being greeted like an old friend and from corner of his eyes he caught Percy and Ron getting a bit angry in jealousy. Harry replied simply, I am fine, Minister. Cornelius turned towards Bulgarian Minister, this is Harry Potter. You know the boy who survived. The Bulgarian Minister also tried to look for the famous scar on Harry's forehead. Fudge continued, he can't understand a word I am saying. I need Crouch for this language job. Ah. His elf seems to have saved a seat for him. From corner of his eyes Harry caught a house elf sitting in the front row shaking with fear. Fudge then made enough fool of himself muttering unpleasant things about the Bulgarian Minister. Harry was sure that it was not possible that the Bulgarian Minister did not understand a word of English. Fudge stated, here comes Lucius. And strode forward to greet Malfoy and his family. Harry saw Draco accompanying his father along with a blonde woman, Narcissa Malfoy, Draco's mother. Lucius, here is Bulgarian Minister and this is Arthur Weasley, introduced Fudge. The air in the room turned thick at the moment and Harry remembered the scene in his second year when the two adult wizards have come to physical blows. Lucius said expressionlessly, oh. Arthur, what did you have to sell to get the tickets of the VIP box? I am not sure if your house fetched you this much. Fudge, unaware of the happenings, was about to mutter something when Harry beat him to it. For being merely a lord of ancient and most noble house, you sure are too much confident, Malfoy, considering specially when Lord Apparent to two of most ancient and most noble house of Potter and Black is standing in front of you. For a moment it felt that the whole room would drown in suffocation. Even the idiot Fudge felt the tension rising to high. Malfoy was on the verge of lashing, especially when mentioned Black. He had been waiting all this time for Draco to get the Black Lordship. Half his influence from the Ministry came from the fact he had paraded about Draco being future Lord Black, and other half came from the fact that none of the 5 most ancient and most noble houses except Greengrass family were active in politics in Wizengamot. Amelia Bones did her duty as DMLE head, and though wielded the Bones vote as regent of Susan Bones, was not an active participant in wizarding politics. And Augusta Longbottom as Regent Longbottom of Neville Longbottom hardly attended Wizengamot. With Blacks and Potters out of the picture, Malfoy was one of the most powerful lord actively involving himself with politics. The whole room screamed of silence at that moment. Chapter 30, Ireland wins. Note, let me clarify about Harry being Lord Apparent of Potter and Black. Some of you assumed that he was not going to hide it. Lord Apparent implies that Harry is guaranteed to become a lord of that family, but since he is not of age, he cannot claim the lordship. For Potter there is no doubt of him being Lord Apparent, but with Black Sirius should be Lord Apparent, but since he is a criminal, everyone assumes Draco Malfoy to be Lord Apparent of Black. Harry only mentioned Black to infuriate Lucius. It has no connection any of him about revealing his lordship. He was Lord Apparent of Potters even before he attended Hogwarts. August 1994. VIP Box Quidditch World Cup Final. Lucius was about to lose his temper and was almost on the verge of taking out his wand, when Narcissa stepped forward and took hold of Lucius' wand arm. "I think we should take our seat, my dear." Lucius glared at Harry, who was continuously smiling in return. Lucius then nodded stiffly and Narcissa pulled the Malfoy lord along with her. Draco followed his parents but not before sneering in Harry's direction. As soon as Lucius departed, Fudge started spluttering, "I think I will tend to other guests," and with this he was gone. The Bulgarian minister had a confused expression on his face, but he followed Fudge and left in the end. Immediately Ron marched towards Harry and almost screamed, "What was that, you being Lord Apparent Potter and Black?" Harry stared impassively at Ron. "What was what?" Ron almost raged, "You know what I mean." Harry continued to stare but did not speak. Arthur intervened, "I think we should take our seats. We can discuss these things later." Harry wanted to scream that him being Lord Apparent of Potter and Black had nothing to do with you idiots, but he held himself back. It was not that he lost his control and revealed that he had gained knowledge of his heritage and family. He had thrown this particular information as bait. He wanted to see how the Weasleys would react and how Dumbledore would react. Although it was a big information but still manageable for both parties. Dumbledore would think even if Harry knew everything, he could not do anything. Since he would be unable to take up lordship before coming of his age, other than bragging, Harry could do nothing with that power. The group then took their respective seats. Harry occupied his seat on one edge of the row and Hermione purposefully or coincidentally took seat next to him. Harry could see a myriad of expressions etched on Hermione's face. Confusion, curiosity, worry, anxiety all at a single time was struck to her face. Harry knew very well that how hard was it for Hermione to control herself from asking a dozen of blazing questions at his direction. He eyed her intensely, which drew Hermione's attention. He said, "Hermione, we will talk at Hogwarts. But for now, know that there is nothing to worry." Hermione nodded slowly in response. Ludo Bagman's voice started to boom with description of the World Cup. He finally called for the mascots and in came a flutter of beautiful girls as Bulgarian mascots. "Vila," muttered Harry in his mind. The moment the group of mascots entered the stadium, the whole of stadium erupted in huge cheer. Harry could make out 4 men losing control and drooling and then trying to jump over the stands only to be held back by the females present in the stadium. Even in the VIP box, which was a great distance from the Vilas, many males were affected. The 2 most noticeable were Ron and Draco. Ron was screaming and shouting at the edge of the box only to be held back by Arthur Weasley. Draco was also in the same condition and was held back by Narcissa, though Harry could safely say that Draco was a bit more dignified than Ron. Harry caught Hermione looking everywhere in confusion, trying to understand what was happening. Harry started, "They are Vilas. Basically, they are classified as a creature similar to a goblin or a house elf." Hermione heard him attentively. It was rare for her to not know anything, and on top of that Harry was aware of that information. He continued, "Basically they are half humans. In a normal state they appear completely to be a human, but when enraged or their emotions run high, they turn into half human with half a bird-like appearance. They grow beaks in place of their lips and wings behind their back." He sighed, "The condition of all the males you are seeing because of their allure. Allure is their greatest weapon. They could turn any weak male with low willpower into a drooling fool in 2 moments. This is the condition when they are not actively using their allure, and it is only its passive state. Also, every Vila have a great affinity to fire." Hermione could not help but was surprised at all the information. She commented, "So you have a strong willpower." Harry chuckled, "What do you think?" Hermione smiled but did not answer, but her smile told all the answer. The Vilas were followed by the Ireland's mascot, Leprechaun. Again, Harry gave a small introduction to Hermione about these small creatures. Soon both the team were introduced and the game began. The game got all exciting, but ultimately Ireland bested Bulgaria with a margin of 170 to 160. The only saving grace for Bulgaria was that their star seeker, Victor Krum, caught the snitch, otherwise avoiding a humiliating defeat. The match was followed by a small scuffle between the mascots of 2 teams. Harry also caught Ludo avoiding to pay Fred and George on their bet by stuttering some illogical logic. Arthur asked Harry to spend the night with them intent. Though Harry wanted to leave but decided to stay with them. Ron kept a small distance with Harry, though no one breached the subject of Harry being Lord Apparent Potter and Black. Harry wondered if Arthur had given Ron some talk to not speak about the matter. Though at last Harry had to share his room with other Weasleys. They had got bunk bed and Harry took the upper bunk directly above Ron. Hermione and Ginny went into the next tent. At somewhat in midnight, Harry snapped open his eyes when the tranquility of the silence was broken by sudden screams. With his enhanced body thanks to his powerful magic and the resurrection stone, he heard the screams from a large distance. Without disturbing any Weasley, Harry jumped from the bed and even before he could touch the ground he turned invisible. Next chapter Harry is going for his first magical battle after receiving his inheritances. Hang on. I would also like to hear about if you want to be Harry being OP or just above average. I have my ideas about it but your opinions would also be considered. Chapter 31, First Battle. August 1994. Quidditch World Cup Final Venue. Harry, quick on his steps, arrived outside the tent and moved in the direction of the screams. The whole area was in mayhem with people running around in fright. Harry finally came face to face with the source of disturbance. Almost a dozen men fully dressed in their Death Eater attire with their classic mask were marching forward, firing spells in random directions. One of those Death Eaters was levitating 4 people, probably a family, and another one was torturing them using the Cruciatus Curse Crucio. Harry recognized the man among the 4 as the Muggle who was managing the site area for the tents. Next one was a woman, probably his wife, and 2 children. The elder one being around 18 while the younger one around the same age as of Harry. Witnessing almost dozens of wizards running away from such a small group, Harry could only mutter pathetic. He understood how easy it was for Voldemort to terrorize the wizarding world when no one had the guts to face these Death Eaters. Harry willed and his invisibility cloak turned black and completely covered his body. A hood rose from the cloak and covered Harry's head. A black mist spread from the cloak covering his face completely and blurring rest of the body part. Only Harry's glowing green eyes were clearly visible to the outside world. This was one such feature of the cloak he had found about recently. Harry's sudden appearance drew a lot of attention. Even the Death Eaters stared in his direction. Harry let out a chuckle and brought out his holly wand, and in moments he levitated one of the supporting steel poles of the tent, transformed it into a very sharp spear and banished it towards the man casting the Crucio. Before anyone could react further, the pole-transformed spear pierced the man, embedded itself into the ground and the body of the Death Eater was skewered. A fountain of blood gushed from the Death Eater body and he was dead in an eye blink. All the screams suddenly stopped and every eye stared at him. Giving no chance for anyone to react, Harry repeated the same process with another pole and banished it towards the man who was levitating the Muggle family in the air. But unfortunately for Harry, the man was alert and jumped to his side to avoid the spear, even so it grazed a bit of his arm. Harry's second attack brought the Death Eaters of their shock and all of them fired curses at the same time in Harry's direction. Thanks to Harry's enhanced body, Harry dived to his left, rolled on the ground and was on his feet in moments. In a rapid succession Harry fired 2 blood boilers. One of the curses stuck a man squarely in his chest while the other one completely missed its mark. The Death Eater screamed in pain. Harry's strength lied in his insane magical reserves and the speed with which he could cast magical spells. With the Elder Wand supporting his magical flow, using his Holly Wand was very easy. No wand movements, no time waste in magical chanting of spells. Harry could cast 3 magical spells in the same time in which the Death Eaters could cast 1. Followed by his blood-boiling curse, Harry cast a magical shield which was bombarded by the combined magical curses of the Death Eaters. The shield held on its own, but was shattered at the last and 2 spells slipped past the shield. While one of the curses went just over his shoulder, the other one, which was a cutting curse, struck his left arm. Harry felt an intense pain in his arm. The spell had managed to cut his flesh and almost reached his bones. Harry knew that he had to do something quick. Even if he was insanely powerful, facing a large number of enemies was very risky. Secondly, the Aurors could be here any minute. Even if he was on their side and protecting the innocents, politics was a fickle thing. Harry ignored the pain in his arms and fired a bombarda maxima at the ground near the Death Eaters. Dust and debris rose in the air, blocking the vision for both the parties. Harry quickly dodged and jumped to his right side, avoiding few of the curses that came his way. Harry, even when in air, fired quick banishing charms on few of the larger pieces of pebbles floating in the air. Though his vision was blocked, since the Death Eaters were in group, at least 2 or 3 of the banished pebbles struck the Death Eaters. As soon as the dust settled, Harry saw one of the Death Eaters severely injured thanks to his banished pebble which had struck the Death Eater on the head. Harry let out a hearty chuckle which echoed in the silence of the field. I really overestimated you all. If you were Voldemort's stooges, I fail to see how did he even terrorize the whole country. You morons in a group can't even take down a single wizard. The Death Eaters growled in response and another barrage of spells came in Harry's direction. Harry could make out at least 3 vivid light of the killing of Adikevadra curse. With magical shield being out of question, Harry pulled a large magic reserve from his core and used a powerful Oxio charm on a standing tent nearby. The summoned tent was ripped apart from the ground and came in between the Death Eaters and Harry Potter, taking the full brunt of the spells coming in Harry's direction. The tent was ripped to shreds in a moment, but fortunately for Harry, every magical spell faded away. From the corner of his eyes, Harry caught the Aurors fast approaching. Harry laughed, "Take my last gift." And then he pulled a humongous amount of magic from his core, and exactly at the same moment a huge bird flashed above Harry in lightning. From Harry's wand erupted bolts of lightning and sailed towards the Death Eaters, and in another a flash of lightning, both the bird and Harry Potter disappeared from the spot, bypassing all kinds anti-apparition and anti-portkey wards. Harry's first battle done. Please comment your views on what you thought about the battle. Also guess who is the bird flashing in lightning. Chapter 32, The Tale of an Owl. August 1994. Quidditch World Cup Final. With a flash of lightning, Harry and the bird appeared in another corner of the campsite of the tent. The lightning around the bird faded, revealing a snowy white owl, Harry's first real friend Hedwig. All of this began few days later after Harry's magical reserves was unbound. Flashback. Harry started to feel these changes when Hedwig felt more intelligent to him. Even since the beginning, Harry had acquired Hedwig, she was most intelligent bird in Hogwarts. Initially Harry ignored these changes, but one time he saw small bolts of lightning around Hedwig's claw. For some time Harry assumed it to be some kind of hallucination, but then he witnessed the same lightning bolt again after some time. This threw Harry in state of confusion and worry. To solve this riddle about his most trustworthy friend, Harry threw himself in deep study of all kind of pets. He went through all the books he had acquired from the vaults of his 5 families. Ultimately, he discovered some clue in a book from Slytherin's vault. It informed Harry that owls were not used as magical bird for communication in all the world. The book particularly mentioned about the country India, where the owls were considered birds of wisdom and intelligence. Not only this, the nocturnal bird also represented wealth and was considered a good omen. Even though Harry discovered some related information, Harry had no clear answer to what was happening to Hedwig. As the time passed, the lightning flashing around Hedwig increased. Though Harry had a gut feeling that whatever was happening to Hedwig was a good thing, but could not stop himself from worrying. The other major event happened some days back, when suddenly Hedwig suddenly flew from its perch and landed at Harry's study table, on which Harry was reading some book. Hedwig stared at Harry for some moments, after which he struck his beak on the backside of Harry's palm, drawing blood. This came as shock to Harry, but before he could register what truly happened, he felt a magical connection growing in his subconscious. This connection was nothing like the bond he had with his elf, but a deeper connection. Though he had no idea what was happening, Harry trusted his instincts and allowed the magical connection to settle in his mindscape. As the connection finally completed, the duo of the bird and wizard were surrounded in a magical lightning. Over the time period, Harry deduced that Hedwig was no ordinary owl. She was a very special bird. For now, Hedwig had given access to 2 of her powers. Hedwig allowed to travel Harry freely, just like teleportation. It a similar method to phoenix travel, but Harry had no complete information about Hedwig's teleportation power. The second power which Harry now had access to, lightning. With the help of Harry's connection with Hedwig, Harry was now very highly attuned to lightning. For now Harry could fire spells similar to what he used against the Death Eaters in his last attack. Flashback ends. With a quick thought, Harry quickly discarded his invisibility cloak attire and started to walk in direction towards the tents. He had not even taken few steps when a short distance from him a loud boom sounded and a huge skull floated in air. Harry muttered in frown, "Death Eater mark." He quickly changed his direction and started to walk towards the mark. In minutes Harry reached a clearing in the woods and was surprised to discover few familiar faces. Hermione and Ron stood in the center of the clearing. A few other wizards had their wands pointed at the duo. The group of wizards was being led by Crouch. Among the group Harry recognized another minister wizard, whom Arthur had told them about, Amos Diggory. He was father of Hufflepuff seeker, Cedric Diggory. Harry could see Ron almost whimpering in fear, muttering something, and though Hermione stood somewhat bravely, Harry could feel the small shiver in her spine. Harry roared at the top of his voice, "Who dares?" Harry's roar brought all attention on him, but before anyone could say anything, another wizard, Arthur Weasley, came running in their direction. He shouted, "Crouch, he is my son and his friends." Harry also moved quickly and stood next to Hermione, pressing his hands on her shoulder, trying to reassure her. Crouch pointed towards Ron and Hermione, they were found at the crime scene. He continued to press forward, Tell me girl, what were you doing here? Before Hermione could answer, Harry intervened. Enough of your nonsense, Crouch. Even a fool could tell that the dark mark was fired some distance away from this clearing. Instead of checking up, you are here accusing minors. Crouch almost shouted in anger, don't teach me, boy. I have dealt with more Death Eaters you can ever imagine. Harry's anger flared and his slow and heavy voice boomed in the clearing, I know a lot how you dealt with Voldemorts. Everyone flinched at the name, Stooges. Half of them freed themselves in name of the Imperious Curse, and at least there was one wizard you put in Azkaban without trial. Harry taunted in mocking tone, you are so brave that have no courage to even speak his name. Harry's eye glowed green as he stared at Crouch, and the XDMLE head took a step behind in fear. Amos stepped forward, why don't we calm down, and you Miss and Ron, why don't you tell us something? Hermione, eager to tell, spoke quickly and pointed to her right, the spell was fired from there. We heard the spell and some rustling of the leaves. Amos quickly went into the woods followed by few other wizards while Crouch remained in the clearing. The group in the clearing remained in silence, while Crouch was seething from anger on his humiliation. Minutes later Amos returned back, with an extra wand in his hand. Crouch was about to question when the other wizards stepped back in the clearing with a shivering house elf with them. Harry recognized the elf as the same elf who was keeping a seat for Crouch in the VIP box, where Crouch never came. For many of you worrying if Harry would be nerfed or would be too OP. Here is my take, Harry would be powerful and I am not nerfing him with all the boosts I gave him. Also, though Harry intends to hide his titles and powers, but in doing so he would not be acting like a pathetic and whimpering wizard. As shown in the chapter, when needed Harry would take people head on without fear as with Crouch. I don't find any logic in any powerful person suffering all insults just so that they hide their identity. For powerful people there is a certain pride and they will not lower it for anything. Chapter 33, Winky, the Elf. August 1994. Quidditch World Cup Final. The elf's appearance came as a shock to Crouch. He muttered, no, this can't be, Winky. What happened, Amos? Amos replied grimly, I found the elf there, where the dark mark was conjured. Crouch jerked away, no. How? Arthur interjected, you cannot be serious, Amos. A dark mark is wizard's sign. It requires a wand. Yes, said Amos, and she had a wand. He added, showcasing the extra wand in his hand. Ludo operated exactly at the same moment. He was breathless, the dark mark. He continued, where have you been, Crouch? Have you found out who did it? Crouch did not answer and only stared angrily at a whimpering elf. Amos turned and faced Winky, elf. I am a member from Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creature. Tell me, did you summon the mark? Winky trembled in fear, I is not doing it, sir. She whimpered, I is not knowing how to do it. Amos roared, you were found at the site where the dark mark was conjured, with a wand in hand. Winky started to cry, but Hermione interjected at the moment, it was not Winky. We heard the incantation. It was a deep voice, nothing like Winky's squeak. She looked towards Ron for his support, but that fool did not said anything. Amos stared at Winky and waved the wand almost in her face, if you did not cast the mark, elf, do tell me, what were you doing at this place and where did you pick this wand? Winky whimpered, I is founding the wand in there in the woods, sir. I is not doing it, sir. At the moment Ron's panicked voice came, that is my wand. Everyone stared at Ron incredulously. Arthur questioned, and why don't you have it? Ron muttered, I lost it in the woods when I was running away. Amos' eyes turned hard and he pointed his wand at Ron's wand and said, Prior Incantato. Immediately a snake skull, the miniature version of the dark mark, emerged from Ron's wand. Amos immediately removed his wand and the miniature mark disappeared. The settles that mark was cast from this wand, said Amos. Elf, did you see someone? Winky said in shivering voice, I is not seeing anyone, sirs. Amos turned towards Crouch, Crouch. I should take her to my department, but seeing she is your elf, I leave everything to you. Crouch muttered, rest assured. She will most definitely be punished. I had ordered her to remain in the tent. She violated my order. Winky stammered, Master. Master. Winky, be afraid. Don't punish. Crouch ignored the elf, she will be given clothes. Winky continued to whimper in a pleading tone, while Crouch took out a handkerchief and threw it at Winky, breaking the bond with her. Hermione said nervously, but it was not Winky. Crouch wanted to snap at her, but caught the green eyes of Harry staring in his soul, which made him shut up. Hermione seemed wanting to help Winky but could not do anything. All the Ministry wizards including Crouch, Amos, and Bagman departed from the scene. Arthur too bellowed the golden trio to follow him, back to the tents. Hermione questioned, what is going to happen to her? Arthur sighed, I don't know. Hermione continued, how could they do this to her? They treated her like a slave, and Mr. Diggory called her elf all the time. She wanted to say more but Arthur cut her, Hermione, though I agree with you, this is not the place to discuss. Let us go. Hermione sadly nodded and followed behind. Harry took a moment to follow but not before speaking, Winky, if you want to work for me, call for Dobby. He will answer you. Winky stopped whimpering and looked at Harry in surprise, I is knowing Dobby. I will contact Dobby. Harry nodded and followed behind the group. In the way they trekked in silence, while he found Hermione holding his hands in a tight grip. The silence was broken by Arthur, Harry, where were you? We were so worried about you. Harry answered, I was not able to sleep Mr. Weasley. So I decided to take a walk outside the tent. I heard the screams and ran in different directions in the woods. Arthur nodded simply. Harry questioned, so what exactly happened? Arthur sighed, no one knows. It seems one group of wizards decided to relive their old days. He said referring to the Death Eaters. He continued, but a masked wizard intercepted him. From what I heard from the Aurors and witnesses, the wizard most probably killed 2 of them. Also, he fired some kind of thunder spell in the end which must have injured other few of them. But as soon as the Aurors arrived, both the wizard and the group were gone. They took the bodies of those who died with them. Harry nodded in understanding and silently followed Arthur back to their tents, where Bill, Charlie, and Percy were waiting for them. They asked a lot of questions to Arthur but Harry paid no attention to them and silently waited for the morning. Although he was not that much tired, Harry wanted to return home. He caught both Hermione and Ron stealing glances at him. He could guess Hermione was being nervous and probably wanted to ask a lot of questions. With the first morning ray, he approached Arthur, I think I should leave Mr. Weasley. Arthur nodded and took out another handkerchief. Harry said, I will go by myself Mr. Weasley. I can use the porte-caitte. I will take a public transport from the Leaky Cauldron. You are required here. Though Arthur was uncertain, he gave the porte-caitte to Harry. Harry gave a small nod to Hermione and activated the porte-caitte disappearing from the tent. Chapter 34, Dealing with Dursleys. August 1994. 4. Privet Drive. It was the last day before Harry would be returning to Hogwarts and today, he was going to deal with the Dursleys. Initially he was focused on taking revenge against Dursleys for what they had did to him. But over the month, maturity had struck Harry. For now Harry realized that the Dursleys were not completely at fault. They considered themselves to be a complete normal family and wanted to stay away from all the freakiness. He very well understood Petunia's hatred towards magic. But Dumbledore never cared for their opinion and simply dumped an infant at their gates without any discussion or warning. Even though Harry had never had a true family, he could very well imagine the negative effects if a stranger intrudes a family and occupy their private space. Harry could also understand their reactions on his accidental magic, especially when they were aware of what it was but could do nothing. Harry had also had the goblins thoroughly investigate if the Dursleys had ever received any monetary expenses for Harry's upbringing from Dumbledore. From the investigations he found that they had never received a single penny. At the moment Harry could deal with Dursleys as he wished. He could have simply made them disappear with the power and influence he wielded or inflict on them all kind of torture. Even though Harry still hated them, he chose neither of these. For he was son of the kind and compassionate Lily Potter and Petunia was her last living relative. He arrived at door and rang the doorbell. A grunt was heard and a fat boy opened the door. "Hello Dudley," smiled Harry. "Mom, Dad, the freak is here," shouted Dudley. Harry's temper rose but he kept calm and walked inside the house. Dudley tried to intimidate him in staying out, but he was no old Harry. A simple glare of his glowing green eyes and Dudley was out of his way. Harry was already inside the hall when Petunia and Vernon came out of their room. "What are you doing here, freak? I thought you were being punished for using magic outside school? Is your punishment over?" Vernon almost screamed. A realization dawned Harry and he chuckled, "No uncle. I was not being punished. I simply went to where I should have been from the beginning." He eyed the couple and said, "Please sit down. We should talk out like civilized people." With this Harry took his seat on one of the sofas. Vernon glared at Harry but ultimately took seat on the opposite sofa. Harry started, "To be honest, I could understand why you would treat me in such manner. But even so, the beatings I received and the bullying Dudley did could never be unacceptable. After all, whatever happened, I had no role to play. I did not even understand what I did wrong. I hate you and there is no changing that." Vernon's glare only intensified, but Harry caught Petunia flinching at his last words. He continued, "Recently I discovered a lot of things. I am rich, extremely rich. I am powerful, extremely powerful. I wanted to take revenge and do worse of what you did to me, but in, however despicable manner, you still provided for me for 11 years. You are my mother's last living relative." Harry sighed and continued, "You know about the person that killed my parents and, to inform you, that war is not completely over. I would be putting myself at the center of the war, and as my relatives you could be targeted." Vernon shouted, "What do you mean, freak? We have nothing to do with your wars." Harry chuckled, "Well, when they will come for you, I doubt they would even allow you to speak. And I am in no mood to argue." Harry cut off Vernon whatever he was trying to say. "I am here to offer you a choice. Whatever you choose and whatever happens to you would all be your decision. But this is the last time I am visiting here." With this, Harry pulled a file from his coat and placed it on the table. Vernon grunted as he picked up the file. "What is this?" Harry chuckled in amusement. "As I told you, I am extremely rich and I made a purchase. A small company, you know, Grunnings." Petunia stared at him wide-eyed, while Vernon rapidly tried to search for the proper documents. Harry continued, "The offer is that if you decide to leave England and get a transfer into Grunnings' subsidiary at New York, you can get an increment in your salary while retaining your same position. A house of the same size of 4 Privet Drive will be provided near to the office. Also 10% of company's shares would be transferred onto Aunt Petunia's name. Otherwise, you could decide to stay here if you wish." Vernon took few minutes to go through all the documents and found them to be accurate as Harry had described. Harry said, "You have 3 days to decide. If you wish to take up the offer, simply go to your office and hand over the file to your chairman. He will see to your arrangements. Otherwise, burn that file." With this, he got up and walked up to leave the house. He was about to exit the house when he heard Petunia. She sobbed, "Harry, you know I never hated magic. Lily was my best friend, but when she discovered magic and I was left alone, I was jealous. I also wanted to be special. I even wrote to your school to accept me." She continued while sobbing, "Lily was so kind. Even after all my hatred and jealousy, she continued to care for me till the end. She contacted me before she went into hiding. She cried louder, I pleaded her, begged her to leave the damn country. I knew James was rich. I asked her to go away. I wanted my sister alive, but she would not listen to me. She said she cannot leave. She promised me that she would be safe." She continued, "I lost my sister that day. Maybe I should have treated you better, but past cannot be changed. I never hated you, Harry. I was jealous, maybe even with you, maybe I wanted you to stay away from that damn world. I don't know." Her crying continued, "You are right in hating us. We will be leaving this country. If possible, meet us or write to us once in a while. Bye, Harry." Harry gave a stiff nod and vanished from the house. "I know many of you will not agree with me, by letting go of them without any punishment. But I think I have made my reasons clear in the chapter itself. For those who don't agree, you can assume any punishment you want for them, as they would not be making any more appearance in the story." Chapter 35, Hogwarts Journey. September 1994. Hogwarts Express. Harry had arrived at the King's Cross station before time and had taken his seat in the last compartment. During his one of the many journeys to Diagon Alley to deal with his lord business in Gringotts, he had secured his supplies for Hogwarts. He has upgraded all his requirements into the top grade from the pathetic cheap grade he had before, including his potion kit, dresses, and a new trunk. Thanks to all the new magic he had learned, he did not have any need to carry heavy and the ugly-looking trunk anymore. He had shrunken it and simply kept in his pocket. Harry did not want to deal with an unsatiated Hermione firing her questions for the whole 8 hours journey, or an unintelligent Ron, saying irrational and logic-less things. To avoid them, Harry had turned invisible using his cloak, and he hoped no one would disturb him. Though there was a good chance that he would be intruding someone's privacy in doing so. Harry thought it to be a perfect time to a break from the reading and training he had been doing continuously for 2 months. Harry had his eyes closed when the train started to move and began his return to Hogwarts. 1 hour had passed and train was moving at full throttle, when the gate to his compartment slid open and 2 girls walked inside. One was a tall blonde-haired girl while the other was a black-haired girl, bit shorter than the first girl. Harry recognized the 2 girls immediately, his Slytherin classmates, the blonde being Daphne Greengrass and the other as Tracy Davis. Greengrass sighed and plummeted on the seat opposite Harry, frustration clearly etched on her face, while Tracy took seat on the same seat as that of Harry, not too far away from him. Harry hoped that she does not close the distance, otherwise, there was a good chance that he would be discovered. Tracy started, "Malfoy is really a prick. How long do you have to bear with him?" This perked up Harry's ear. Daphne sighed. All her persona of the Ice Queen of Slytherin gone, I don't know Tracy. Malfoys have been gaining much power recently. With them prodding around about Black Lordship falling to Draco and the Minister of Magic in Lucius Malfoy's pocket, no one opposes them. Both of the girls fell silent until Tracy broke it, "So you will have to marry him, ultimately." Daphne sighed, "I don't know Tracy. My father has been withstanding Lucius Malfoy's pressure from a long time for setting up a marriage between Draco and me. If things continue like this, I would have no option." Tracy asked, "Why don't you ask Potter directly for help? Did you not say that only he has the political mileage to curb Malfoy's wing?" This came as shock to Harry. He had never expected the 2 girls discussing about asking him help. Daphne sighed, "And what do I say? For all purposes, I doubt if he is even aware of his status and responsibilities in the wizarding world. Longbottom is coward for all purpose and Harry has no clue. Bones and I had assumed in the beginning that Harry would approach us regarding the alliance, but he never did. He is completely under Dumbledore's thumb." Tracy questioned again, "Then why don't you and Susan activate the alliance? After all, you both are heiress of most ancient and most noble house. Even if Malfoy gets Black Lordship, he would only have one most ancient and most noble house." Harry internally smirked at this, fully knowing the answer, which Daphne voiced, "No Tracy. Even if all our families have equal votes in the Wisengamot, we are not equal. Blacks are among the richest families with a very wide influence. If a Black Lord decides to call upon the debt owed to them, many smaller families and businesses would simply crumble. Even Bones, Greengrass and Longbottom combined are no match for Black influence. Only the Potters are influential enough to stand beside Black." She continued, "And if Draco assumes the Black Lordship, the alliance will crumble down since Blacks are also part of the alliance. And Harry being ignorant as he seems now, we have no chance of forming a new alliance." Tracy kept shut for a long time. Daphne again sighed, "Tracy, even if I get in confrontation with Draco, you should not intervene. With my status he would not dare to do anything openly, but it is not the case with you. I may protect you for now, but in future, no one knows what will happen. Have you heard what happened to Penelope?" Tracy shook her head, while Harry also focused. Daphne stated, "Well, Penelope was our top student. One of the best to ever graduate from Hogwarts, but a muggle. Like all muggles, she had no idea about the realities of the wizarding world and went against Draco. As a prefect and head girl she served him many detentions, though it never mattered since Draco served those detention with the bat." Daphne finished with a snort, while Harry also chuckled inwardly at reference for Snape. Daphne sighed, "With her talent she should have gotten a top job in Ministry, but Malfoys punished her. She was refused all jobs, even menial one at Ministry. Only Amelia Bones have the guts to go against Malfoys. But even she could not do anything, as few years of experience in other departments is required for any person to serve in DMLE, tying Amelia's hand. With practically being an illiterate without any degree in her muggle world, she had no choice but to work here only, unless she wants to start all over again in the muggle world. Last I heard she was working as a waitress. Our top graduate working as waitress, and Dumbledore just smiles, keeping all the muggles ignorant of what lay ahead." Daphne fumed, and the greatest supporter of Dumbledore's so-called leader of the light, Percy Weasley, simply dumped her. He was not even willing to talk to her. This all came as a surprise and shock to Harry. He never knew any of these things. Well, to say he knew nothing. He wondered if a fate worse than Penelope awaited Hermione, once she graduated from Hogwarts. Probably yes was the answer if he would have still remained unaware of all these things. Chapter 36, Arrival at Hogwarts. September 1994. Hogwarts Express. After Daphne stopped speaking, silence hung in the compartment and an expression of worry could be seen on Tracy's face. Though she would probably not be suffering so much, given that she was not a muggle born but a half-blood. Also, her family was an ancient and most noble family. Daphne immediately switched the topic of conversation to change the depressive mood of the compartment. Both of the girls talked on my different things ranging from their studies, homework, spell weaving to some classroom gossip. Harry was amused to hear himself being mentioned few times in the conversation, but it was nothing more than a casual gossip. Throughout their conversation Harry learned many things he was unaware of. From the subtle power struggle in the Slytherin house to how he and his friends were viewed across the school. He learned that half the school considered him an ignorant brat following an useless Weasley, while the other half considered him an arrogant brat, who had not bothered to reply to any one of the single letters or gifts they had sent him, expressing their thanks for vanquishing Voldemort. Harry again cursed Dumbledore for a bit before gaining some composure. The journey which he wanted to use for rest turned out to be an arduous one. He had to keep his movement minimal so as not to produce any kind sound, fearing that he might be discovered. Half an hour before Hogsmeade Station was about to arrive, both the Slytherin girls left the compartment to return to their other friends. Harry let out a deep sigh on his departure and twisted his body to stretch his muscles. September 1994. Hogsmeade Station. Harry stepped down from the train on the platform and started to move towards the path leading towards Hogwarts. Even before he could have taken a couple of steps, a bushy brow hair girl collided and squeezed him with all her might. Hermione asked, almost sobbing, "Harry, where have you been? I have been searching for you since the platform. I was about to go to Professor McGonagall." Harry smiled, "I was on the train only, Hermione. I was just taking a little rest." Hermione let Harry go and stared at him in anger. "Why didn't you even inform me? I was so worried." Harry chuckled and was about to answer the question before a snickering interrupted him. Draco walked haughtily towards Harry, followed by his two bodyguards. He sneered, "Here you are, Potter. Your mudblood of a follower was searching for you on the whole train. I finally thought that the world got rid of your pathetic existence." Though Harry got angry at the specific word used for Hermione, he maintained his composure. "Malfoy. Malfoy." Harry stepped forward, and despite Harry being only slightly taller, he towered over Malfoy. His green eyes glowed like a burning orb, and Malfoy stepped back in fear, bumping into his followers. Harry stood at his position for few seconds but did not speak a word. Finally, he took Hermione's hand and walked away towards Hogwarts. Hermione also walked by Harry's side for few seconds in silence, before her anxiety finally gave in. "What have happened to you, Harry? You are so changed." Harry did not say anything for few seconds and continued to walk forward until he muttered, "I have learned many things, Hermione." Before she could respond, Harry snapped his finger and a thick book appeared in his hands. "Thanks to Dobby. Introduction of Wizarding World, Politics and Families by Griselda Marchbanks." Harry handed the book to Hermione. "Read this book before we talk. Only then you will be able to understand some of my answers." Hermione nodded, already engrossing her in the introduction of the book. Harry suddenly turned around and faced Hermione. "I hope I can trust you, Hermione." Hermione stared at him in confusion until she nodded her head fervently. For the first time Harry tried to use passive legitimacy and could feel Hermione's unwavering determination to stay true to him. Harry smiled and both of them resumed their walk. Hermione questioned again, "Why is Ron so upset with you? On the journey I asked him to help me in finding you, but he was not very pleasant. He then got into a fight with me. He was calling you arrogant and also that you are starting to turn evil." Harry laughed. What more could he have expected from a person with half a brain? He knew, him announcing himself as Lord Apparent of House Black, a known dark family, was the reason Ron called him evil. He could not help but feel amused when he thought about their reactions, when the world would learn of him being Lord Slytherin, supposedly the darkest wizard ever known to mankind. He chuckled, "I am also trying to figure out Hermione." Hermione wanted to ask more questions but stopped herself and went back to turning the pages of the book. Soon the duo reached the perimeter of Hogwarts, and as Harry stepped his feet, Harry felt the Hogwarts tuning in with him. The land around Hogwarts and its castle was jointly owned by the four founders, and since Harry was Lord Gryffindor and Lord Slytherin, he had half the ownership of the Hogwarts castle. For now Harry's control over Hogwarts was almost equal or a bit greater to that of Dumbledore. Dumbledore was restricted from making many changes in the Hogwarts, since he was not the real owner but a caretaker. Harry had no such restrictions, and with no Lord Ravenclaw or Lord Hufflepuff, Harry remained as the sole decision-maker. If he wished he could tear apart the control all the wards from Dumbledore to himself, taking complete control over the Hogwarts castle, but that would immediately notify Dumbledore, and so Harry refrained from doing so. Chapter 37, Cloak, Legilimency and Occlumency must read, not a chapter. So many people would have wondered that why did Harry in his battle during Quidditch World Cup did not fired his spells remaining invisible. Well, he could have done since it is a fantasy fanfiction, but that would pull all the interest in battles if Harry could simply remain invisible. So I have restricted the cloak. The cloak was made to sneak and hide, and that would be its sole purpose. Meaning as long as you are hidden you cannot cast a magical spell. Secondly, the cloak only fools the eyes, and magical wards and protection, which means ears, noses and touch would still work. So, Harry could be heard from the cloak, he could be smelt and felt upon coming in contact. The other look I gave Harry with his cloak is simply to give him a cool look and a medium to hide his identity. And don't fret over the cloak being used in such a manner. I could have simply used a magical spell or a family heirloom from any of the families, or even more, an inferior version of the cloak made by Ignotus Peverell before the perfected version was created. Legilimency, many would have questions that why does Harry simply not read the minds to discover the truth? Well, he could have done it, but again, then what will the story explore? So, I have restricted legilimency. One passive legilimency could be used only to gather surface thoughts of mind only if the person have no structured mindscape. Most wizards and witches are trained by their families in mind arts, but rarely one is talented enough. People like Dumbledore, Snape, Voldemort, and now Harry can read the surface thoughts of such people too, thanks to their mastery in the mind arts, but any deeper they would be discovered. 2. By actively performing the spell of legilimency one can enter the other's person mindscape completely and read any kind of memories if they are able to overcome the defense of the invaded mind. But it cannot be done by remaining in hiding. Whether the person knows occlumency or not, it will not matter. Once invaded, even a muggle will feel the information being extracted from their minds. Occlumency, this is the mind art used to protect the mind from invasion by structuring and building defenses in the mindscape. An organized mind is also useful in keeping, processing, retaining and extracting information from the mind. It also helps in maintaining control over one's emotions. It helps in faster spell casting. It will also help in battles, as spells will be faster to cast, mind will process things faster and will think faster about what spell to cast, where to dodge, etc. Chapter 38, Dumbledore. August 1994. The Great Hall, Hogwarts School. All the students arrived in the Great Hall with a buzzing excitement and took their seats on their respective house tables. Harry took his seat in almost the middle of at the end of the 4th year. To his left was Hermione Granger, followed by other 4th years. To his right was Katie Bell, a fellow Quidditch player and 1 year senior than him. "Hello Katie," he greeted warmly. "Hello Harry, hope you are doing well," came the reply from Katie. Harry answered, "Yes, I am doing well. Tell me, how are you doing?" Any answer Katie was going to give Harry was interrupted by sound of hurried footsteps. Professor McGonagall came marching with her usual strict expression, with somewhat nervous and excited looking first years, quickly following behind her. Harry could not help but feel amused at the tactics of Professor McGonagall. She on the first day itself solidified her image as the strict, no-nonsense type of woman. One by one the sorting began, and Harry found 2 people from the high table staring in his direction. Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape. POV Dumbledore. Dumbledore was a man of power and influence. He held 3 important positions in the wizarding world. He was the headmaster of the most premier school of magic in Britain. He was chief warlock of the wizarding council called Wizengamot. He was the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. He was also decorated with Order of Merlin, first class. His political power was higher than any other. His combined total votes in Wizengamot were 13 vote, Hogwarts Headmaster 3, Chief Warlock 5, Order of Merlin 3, Most Noble House of Dumbledore 2, which was more than double than that of second highest wielder of votes. Along with the help of people and families loyal to him, he wielded a massive influence in the council. People said that in greatness he had rejected the post of Minister of Magic few times. If only they knew how foolish they were. If he became Minister of Magic, he would have to give up all his other posts. His total votes would be reduced to 11, 6 from being Minister of Magic, 3 for Order of Merlin and 2 from Most Noble House of Dumbledore. Though notably his biggest loss would be his control over Hogwarts. This was a school which almost every wizard and witch of magical Britain attended. In Hogwarts he imprinted his greatness in the minds of younger children, who would later serve the ministry in all its departments. These wizards and witches served him as his eyes and ears and were his loyal followers. For decades he had been the true leader of the wizarding world. No one dared to defy or go against him. But in the past few months, things had not gone the way he had wanted. Firstly, that damn Sirius had escaped from his prison. He had played a major role as a chief warlock in sending Sirius to Azkaban without a trial. He had raised Harry as he had wished and turned out him to be the perfect puppet he had wanted. Even so, he had turned the things in his favor and subtly made Sirius remain a fugitive and had not allowed him a proper trial. His difficulties not ended there. Only few days later in the summer vacation, his elder wand, his death stick, disappeared. He had no idea what had happened to wand. He tried to find every possible answer for the disappearance of the wand, but no logical conclusion came out. His only hope remained asking Harry if something similar have happened to his cloak. And thinking about the cloak only increased his frustration. He had wanted the ownership of the cloak. He could have wielded 2 Deathly Hallows, but James was smart. It was hard to persuade James Potter to give up on his cloak, especially when a madman was chasing you. It took a lot of convincing and logic like that Voldemort would not be fooled by a simple cloak, and his research regarding the cloak might help Dumbledore devise some substantial method of hiding, for James to give up on the cloak. But even so, James has stubbornly made him swear a magical oath to return the cloak to Harry if something happened to him and Lily during his first year at Hogwarts. For 11 years Dumbledore had searched method to gain the true loyalty of the cloak, but he failed. Even so, he was not worried about the cloak. After all, he would have it back, if not now then later. Then came the news from Weasleys about Harry announcing himself as Lord Apparent Potter and Lord Apparent Black. Dumbledore had done his best to keep Harry away from his heritage. He had forced Harry to stay in the Muggle world, completely cut off from the Wizarding Society in the name of blood wards, but he could only curse Sirius now. Other than Sirius writing this information in his letters, Harry had no other source of knowing these things. He needed to have a chat with Harry and convince him to enjoy his childhood and to not worry about these things. What his family left for him, he has no use such wealth and influence. And damn those Potters, even if he had forced himself as Harry's magical guardian, he got nothing. He had very limited access only to the Trust Vault, and even if he was the magical guardian, he could not take over Potter's vote as regent, as the Potters have firmly engraved in their family law that only a blood relative could become regent for a minor lord apparent. The last thing which also made him most anxious was the sudden appearance of a powerful wizard. He had seen the memories of few spectators who had witnessed the wizard killing at least 3 Death Eaters and injuring others. A single wizard doing that was problematic. No ordinary wizard could have done that same thing. Dumbledore could feel the power that the wizard radiated. He was a complete unknown element, and Dumbledore had no idea where that element will choose its place. Chapter 39, Triwizard Tournament. September 1994. The Great Hall, Hogwarts. The feast in the Great Hall after the sorting ceremony was in full flow, and Harry could see Ron Weasley, seating a few seats away from Harry, stuffing his mouth with as much as food he was able to. Harry could safely say that even Dudley Dursley had better table manners than the idiot Ron. At one point the conversation somehow moved towards the house elves between near Headless Nick and Hermione, and the witch was horror-struck in shock, learning that over 100 house elves worked in Hogwarts' kitchen. She was quick to describe this as an unpaid slave labor and refused to eat another bite of food during the feast. Harry could see a trouble brewing, and Harry thought he must explain Hermione about the nature of the house elves. Soon the feast got over and Dumbledore stood up. Now that we have our bellies full, we must move forward to few notices I have. Mr. Filch informs you all that the list of forbidden items in the castle has increased to somewhat around 437. The full list is available in his office, if anybody want to check it, announced Dumbledore. He continued, the Forbidden Forest if forbidden for everyone, and so is the Hogsmeade Village for anyone below 3rd year. Dumbledore then took a long breath and sighed, I must also painfully inform you all that this year the Inter-House Quidditch Cup will not take place. Silence hung in the hall at the announcement, and Harry wondered if it was related to the big event Ludo Bagman was talking during the World Cup before Crouch shut him up. Dumbledore went on, this is due to an event that will be starting in October, and continuing throughout the school year, taking up much of the teachers' time and energy, but I am sure you will all enjoy it immensely. I have great pleasure in announcing that this year at Hogwarts. At the same moment, thunder rumbled and the door of the Great Hall was banged open. In walked a gruff-looking man with a limp, and his legs made a loud thud with each step he took. The face of the man was peculiar and numerous scars charred his face. Though the most interesting feature were his eyes. One of the eyes was fake eye which moved continuously, and at moment it turned completely and was pointed towards the man's head. Alastair Moody, muttered Harry in his mind. One of the finest aurors in the recent years. Harry had learned about the man during his studies in the past month, regarding the events of the war, and held a lot of respect for the retired auror. Also called Mad-Eye Moody was one of those wizards, whom the Death Eaters feared. He was not the one to fire stunners and disarming spells when the Death Eaters threw unforgivables like candies. He was brutal, skilled, and most importantly ready to kill the scums of the society. The man limped towards Dumbledore, shook hands, and exchanged few words and then took his seat on empty chair at the right side of Dumbledore's chair. "May I introduce to our defense against the dark arts teacher?" said Dumbledore, his voice booming in the silence. "Professor Moody." Only 3 people clapped at the introduction, Dumbledore himself, Hagrid and Harry. Moody paid no heed and busied himself in food. Harry caught Ron muttering about his father helping Moody in something. Dumbledore cleared his throat. "As I was saying," he said, smiling at the sea of students before him, all of whom were still gazing transfixed at Mad-Eye Moody, "we are to have the honor of hosting a very exciting event over the coming months, an event that has not been held for over a century. It is my very great pleasure to inform you that the Triwizard Tournament will be taking place at Hogwarts this year." The announcement was followed by intense excitement among students, and Dumbledore then went into few details about the history of the tournament and how it was cancelled due to high casualties. Though the excitement somewhat died down when Dumbledore announced that only students of age, meaning those who have crossed 17 years, would be allowed to participate in the tournament, and he would personally set up an age line. Fred Weasley and George Weasley were the most heartbroken ones, and they even declared that anyhow they will find a method to put their names for the selection of the champions. The feast soon ended and the students started to return back to their dormitory. Harry stood up and walked towards the head table, when he found Professor McGonagall approaching towards the Gryffindor table. "Professor," Harry greeted the Transfiguration Mistress. "Mr. Potter, I was coming to find you," replied McGonagall. "What is it, Professor?" questioned Harry. She replied, "Headmaster wants to speak to you in his office." Harry raised his eyebrows. Though he expected Dumbledore to talk to him, he felt it was too soon. He asked, "About?" "That I am not aware of, Mr. Potter," said McGonagall. "Very well, Professor. But as you are my head of the house, I would ask you to remain during the meeting," added Harry. Harry had no idea if McGonagall was among those directly involved with Dumbledore. He thought that her behavior and reaction during certain moments would help Harry to sense her true nature. McGonagall fell into silence at the odd request. As far as she was concerned, Harry had always shared a special relation with Dumbledore, but nonetheless she nodded in agreement. "You also seemed to talk to me about something," said McGonagall. Harry answered, "That can wait till our meeting, Professor." McGonagall nodded, "Very well. Follow me." With this, Harry Potter and Minerva McGonagall started their walk towards the headmaster's office, which would soon be turning into an arena for battle of words. Chapter 40, Dumbledore's Question. September 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. McGonagall and Harry arrived at the headmaster's office, and just as McGonagall was to knock at the door, Dumbledore's voice came from inside, "Come in, Minerva." Minerva, followed by Harry, entered the office. Harry entered the office and found it to be exactly same as the previous time. Brightly lit with lot of trinkets and decorations providing a welcoming environment in the office. Few bookshelves and Fox on his perch. The sorting hat placed on one of the shelves. And finally, the legendary and the splendid Gryffindor sword placed in one of the glass cases. The sword was rightfully his. Even if he would not have been Lord Gryffindor, the sword should have belonged to him. He had discovered the sword after it was missing for centuries, and by right of conquest, Harry owned the sword. On the chair behind the desk, sitting was Albus Dumbledore, but what surprised Harry was Snape's presence in the office. He was occupying a conjured chair in one side of the office. Dumbledore waved his wand and a single chair was conjured at the other end of his desk. He said, "Ah! Harry, my boy, wonderful to have you back. Take your seat." He turned towards Minerva, "Thank you, Minerva, for escorting Harry," and dismissed her. Harry walked towards the chair to take his seat and waited for McGonagall's response. He wanted to see if she would stay true to her word or abandon him. From the corner of his eyes Harry caught the conflicted expression on her face. She took a deep breath. "I am afraid, I will have to join the meeting, Albus. As the head of Mr. Potter's house, he has requested my presence." Meanwhile Harry had taken his seat and Dumbledore turned towards him. "I don't think that would be necessary, Harry." Harry remained impassive for few moments and took his sweet time to answer, "A lot of things are not necessary, Headmaster. I am sure even this meeting would not be that necessary." Dumbledore frowned at Harry's expression and tried to give a disappointed look to Harry, but seeing no other reaction from Harry, he sighed, "Very well, Minerva. I assume that you are more than capable enough to see to your seating arrangement." Minerva, and with wave of her wand, another chair similar to Harry appeared next to him. Minerva then occupied the chair. Dumbledore began, "How have been your summer vacation, Harry?" Harry chuckled inwardly that he was going to enjoy pricking the old coot today. Harry answered, "I think Hermione would love to have this conversation, Headmaster. I should call her." Harry started to stand up, but Dumbledore stared at him in confusion. "I wanted to ask you, Harry. If I did want to ask Miss Granger, then surely, I would have called her." Harry put up a confused expression. "I thought you wanted to hear some interesting stories about summer vacation of students. As for my vacation, well, I definitely enjoyed being locked in a small attic and having scraps of food once a day." Minerva was horror-struck at the answer, and she looked, firstly at Harry and then at Dumbledore for answers. Dumbledore kept quiet for a moment. "I see." Harry again started to get up, and again Dumbledore interrupted in confusion. "I don't think we are finished, Mr. Potter." Harry again sat back in confusion. "You didn't wanted to ask about my vacation." Dumbledore smiled. "I most certainly did, but we can talk about few more things." Harry kept quiet and waited for Dumbledore to speak. Having no chance but to come clean at the lack of cooperation from Harry, he asked, "Where did you learn about the Lord Apparent thing?" Minerva again looked at both of them in confusion. Harry asked back, "I don't see my personal matter being related to my school business, Headmaster." Dumbledore again sighed. "Harry, I know you have lot of difficulties in flaunting your status in front of the whole world, especially talking about Black Lordship in front of Malfoys is a dangerous task. Even if Sirius told you about those things, you should not involve yourself with these things. I would say you should enjoy your school life for now, make friends." Before Harry could respond, Snape snickered from the side. What can be more expect from an arrogant brat? Flaunting his wealth, fame, and position is all he could do. Harry turned his neck sideways, and let go of a small portion of control he was having on his magic. The atmosphere in the room turned thick and Harry's eyes glowed green. Dumbledore could feel a small part of the astonishing amount of magic Harry had in his core, and he wondered that if his magical binding has weakened or Harry again got stronger. He had similar doubts, when Harry had cast the Patronus in his 3rd year and he had checked Harry when he was unconscious, to find the magical binding intact. Harry's voice boomed, "You know, Headmaster, if my mother or my father would have still been alive, what would have they done?" He continued without giving chance for a reply, "They would have ripped this Snape's tongue out of his mouth, before he could have uttered a single word against me." Harry turned back to face Dumbledore and pulled back his control. "Looks like I will satisfy your curiosity. Sirius did not tell me. Ideally, he should have, but thanks to a jealous, insufficient, incompetent man and definitely lacking the word you preach most often, forgive, Sirius was not able to." Harry's implication towards Snape was neither lost on Dumbledore nor Snape himself. He continued, "Be it my luck or coincidence, I discovered some of my mother's old stuff. It contained 2 diaries. One of my mother and other of my father. Both of them contained a lot of information about their school years. Few particular incidents were mentioned in detail." He continued, "As for enjoying my time in school, I am afraid that facing Voldemort's wraith in 1st year, his soul-possessing diary and a huge basilisk in 2nd year and hundreds of Dementors in 3rd year is not something I would call enjoying." This time not pretending, Harry stood up. "Professor McGonagall, I would like to discuss few things. I would be waiting near your office." Giving no time for interruption, Harry stormed out of room, leaving complete silence. Minerva glared at Dumbledore, as if saying prepare your answers, and then at Snape, and she also left the office.
Thanks for listening.